it's incredibly important to proceed optimistically cautious with a lot of these technologies and finding that balance, because sometimes it's great to use it and sometimes it's just not. So when you're identifying a tool or you're identifying really a use first and thinking, okay, how can this help my students? And then how can technology play a role? There's plenty of times where I don't want to use the computer. I don't want the computer open because it's just distracting for the students and it's not good for this part of the lesson or whatever my learning goals are for that particular day.
Where literacy evolves with technology and language proficiency. This is the Multiliterate Mind podcast with Dr. Liza Trejo and Marnina Falk Colman.
Hello, and welcome to the Multiliterate Mind. I am Dr. Liza Trejo, and I'm joined by my fabulous colleague, Marnina Falk Colman.
Liza, so good to see you this morning. It is morning here.
Yes, so we're exploring how language proficiency, multiliteracy, and human connection and communication are evolving in an AI-driven world. And we're so excited to welcome our guest, Noemí Rodríguez Grimshaw.
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yes.
Thank you. Welcome, Noemí. I'm so excited to have you with us and to dig into this conversation. But before we get started, I want to let us give our listeners, our audience, a little bit of background about you. So, Liza, can I kick that off to you?
So, yeah, and just so everyone knows, Noemí is actually a current teacher and in a school. So if there's any background noise, just bear with us.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So Noemí Rodríguez Grimshaw is a dynamic leader at the intersection of AI, literacy, and multilingual education. So you can see why we wanted to talk to her. And she is also the founder of Lo Logramos Consulting, an award-winning language educator and reading specialist. She empowers teachers worldwide to leverage technology and multiliteracy practices to create engaging, proficiency-based language learning experiences. She is our kind of girl. So her work champions multilingualism as a powerful pathway to connection, equity, and global competence. So I will hand it off to Marnina to start asking you some questions.
That is amazing. It's kind of like you encompass so much of what we've been talking about on this show. I know you've worked across language education, literacy, and now AI, and you are actually an early adopter and almost a thought leader in the world of AI for language education. So I want to know what experiences most shaped how you think about literacy and especially for multilingual learners.
Yeah. So thank you so much again, because when I first saw that this podcast was launching, I also thought, oh my goodness, like this is totally the space in which I'm in.
Yes.
So thrilled to be here and thrilled to share any insight or ideas that I've been working on. I feel like for me, the most important thing has always been to make it experiential for the students. So whenever it is that we're diving into a text, meeting them at their level, making sure that it's engaging, just kind of trying to check all the boxes to make it a full experience for the students. And AI has been such a game changer with doing that with a lot more ease for me on the planning end and really involving or ensuring that I'm including student voices in what it is that I'm creating with them in mind. So what didn't exist before, or what may have taken me hours to do in the past now feels a lot less heavy and a lot less burdensome because I know I can turn to this thought partner, this brainstorming buddy, this tool that is thankfully so helpful.
I'm
How did
curious.
you come about that? Because I know you were doing this early before there was a lot out there. How did you know where to begin? How did you discover that on your path?
So early on in my school district, we were getting insight from the students, of course, that there was this tool that could just give you information so quickly and write your paper for you. And it was a different tool, in my district, we're very lucky. We've been one-to-one for many years. And as a result, technology has always kind of been, a side assistant so to speak. So we've always looked at technology as a tool and how can it help our students and what can it do to really bridge, any gaps that they have. So when we first learned about ChatGPT, it was really from the kids. They were informing us that there was this tool out there that was helping them to this degree. And then we started looking at it and we said, okay, so instead of saying, no, we can't use it, or how do we get kids, because we know the minute we say no, they want to use it more.
Do you have teenagers in your house like me?
I have a preteen, so yes.
Familiar.
So right away we thought, okay, how do we walk alongside the technology and empower both the students and the teachers to feel comfortable using it in a way that serves them? So not replacing the learning, but enhancing what they're doing. And again, just really making it so there's no cost affiliated with using it, right? ChatGPT is open, it's free, which is of course good and bad. But with equity in mind, here we have this incredible thought partner or tutor for some of our students that didn't exist before. Or here with, for example, Notebook LM, we recently taught our multilingual learners here how to use Notebook LM for their own learning purposes with studying before midterms in January. We did like a workshop with the students here, and they felt like this is something that I can use as a tool to help me with unpacking all of this information for my science class, or really digging in deeper to this research assignment that I need to do. So when we spun it in that way, it's worked out where we're opening doors as opposed to shutting the students out from using it, because burying our heads in the sand about it, pretending it doesn't exist, like it's this huge elephant in the space. So I'm really lucky to work where I work, because the administration team, the community has always embraced using technology and how can it enhance what we're doing and make learning experiences even better for our kids.
I love that. Do you mind if I ask you to clarify or explain a little bit for our audience what exactly Notebook LM is? I think most people are familiar with ChatGPT, but I don't know if everyone knows what that is.
Absolutely. So notebooklm.google.com is a Google product. And what it relies on is a source. So it wants to have either a paragraph text, a PDF file, a link to a website. Even if you're using Google Drive, for example, linking your Google slideshow or a Google document, it needs at least one source. You can provide it, I believe, under the free account, you can provide it up to 50. If you're paying, I think you can do up to 300 or more. Obviously, when you pay for something, they give you more access. But with that in mind, it needs one source. And what it does is it scans the source in whatever language it is. So it could be in another language. And it'll give you a brief overview in the middle. And that's really like Gemini, Google's AI, working alongside you. And then on the right-hand side on your screen, you'll see a studio. And within the studio, they just keep adding to it. So they have a mind map, they have quiz capability, they have flashcards, they have infographics, they have slideshows, video overviews. So there's a lot of different ways that you can experience whatever that text source is, and it breaks it down really well. So even with my own stepdaughter who was studying for a science test, she plugged in her notes from class and she was using the quiz feature to quiz herself before an assessment. So it was really nice that it only needs one source and it can do a tremendous amount of things around that one source. So from the student end, it really goes deep and it synthesizes the resources really well. From the teacher end, it then is the ultimate resource creator, because you can take a simple paragraph and design multiple resources for the students to experience said text in different ways.
Wow. I'm like, my multiliteracy brain is flashing and like all the hemispheres of my brain, because I'm like, that is multiliteracies incarnate in digital form, right? Because it's creating all of these different modes from one multimodal text from one original source. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so.
And it can do it in multiple languages, which when I was working with a group of Arabic teachers, because I don't speak or write Arabic, so I was curious to see how good the Arabic was, right? That Notebook LM was producing, and they were pleasantly surprised. So I found that really reassuring because as teachers of the language, and obviously some of them are heritage speakers, native speakers, they were impressed by the output. So I thought, if the Arabic was good, if the English is good, if the Spanish is good, here we have something really powerful.
Wow. I love that. And I'm hearing that you're talking a lot about giving students leveled access to text and being able to accommodate for each of their needs. And we talked about how that connects to also multi-literacies and exposing them to different modes, to all of that. I think something that I'm interested in is how are these digital spaces redefining or transforming what literacy means today? What are you seeing? Kind of how is that shifting? Because I think like what Liza said, you've blown my mind about this multi-literacies. How is this element of a digital tool transforming what literacy looks like to us?
When you say to leveling the text, I also just want to clarify. So, based on a student's reading level or what it is that they're striving for, in my classroom, we're always looking for whatever they're reading or listening to, whatever they're engaging with, to be at least 90% comprehensible. So, there's a little bit there that pushes them, but for the most part, it's, completely understandable. So they don't feel defeated by what it is that they're reading. So the same.
I love that you
Absolutely.
clarified that because I don't know that everyone totally understands what comprehensible input actually is and like how to actually provide that for students, because sometimes we just think input, like input, but the comprehensible piece and that you specified about 90% needs to be able they need to be able to understand about 90%. That's very important for people.
Repetition, but it never feels the same. So that's also, and in essence, kind of the magic of teaching, where that you have, these particular phrases or these expressions that you really want them to own and to acquire. And how do I go about recycling and repeating them in different ways? So it feels new, but me as the teacher, like, I know we've been doing this all week, but that's okay, right? So I know that it's repetitive, but the students feel that level of language acquisition as opposed to I'm just memorizing for a test and then I'm throwing it away.
It maintains that novelty and also that engagement, which is essential because otherwise, like you said, it's very defeating and very like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this anymore.
I always tell when I work with teachers, I say, if it's too hard, they just tune right out. And if it's too easy, they're really not learning anything new. So you kind of got to find that middle ground. So.
Right. So creating that leveled text, this is where too, if you take an original source and you ask it to put it at a novice level versus intermediate versus advanced level, depending on your learners, I like to create A, B, and C versions and then have the students select, okay, if you want to start at A, if you want to challenge yourself a little bit with B, if you want to, I know the original text is level C, but that's technically the hardest one. So depending on their level of, readiness and where they want to step in, usually I'll have them either choose or they'll work in small groups with that particular text. So I know like this group would be best with a level A text versus B versus C. Something that would take me hours to change now, thanks to a tool even as simple as ChatGPT. I early on was using Diffit as my text leveling tool, and that AI platform works really well, again, with literacy strategies and thinking about how to really dissect a text with post reading strategies, during reading strategies, just to keep the students really engaged. And with ChatGPT, though, go ahead, sorry.
What I love about Diffit is it creates those graphic organizers for you, right? I mean, that blew my mind when I started playing around with Diffit. I was like, ooh, and it's making graphic organizers, and and it's pulling vocabulary pictures. And I was like, this is so cool.
Yeah, I like too. It always puts the vocabulary word in context, so there's some sort of meaning behind it with the image as well. So then that way you're getting the understanding of the vocabulary through multiple lenses. With
I was gonna say, do you ever feel like it create the one of my issues with AI? I love it. I love ChatGPT. I use it all the time. But I sometimes get overwhelmed. Like, it gives me so much. It's almost like there's two sides to the coin. It's exact. I was connecting with you completely when you said how quickly it creates all of these things that used to take so long. But then all of a sudden, I have zillions of resources, and sometimes I get overwhelmed on that end. Has that ever happened to you? How do you deal with that?
Absolutely. Well, ChatGPT, we joke around, is very chatty. So in the prompt, that's where the power of the prompt really comes in, and making sure that you include in your prompt limit to 50 words, limit to 25 words, limit no more than 150 words, whatever it is you're hoping for it to do. The same thing goes when the students are engaging with any of these AI tools in which they're having this back and forth. I always have it or train it in advance, like limit your response to no more than 30 characters, because my students don't want to read paragraphs of Spanish as their response. They want to keep it very simple. So that's something that with the training aspect, whichever tool, whichever AI tool you're using, the behind the scenes, the user really does set up the experience, however it is that they want to tailor it and design it. So then that way it feels, hopefully there's ease with using it on the student end and it doesn't feel overwhelming. I also house all of my prompts that I've created, even though everything saves. So everything is there in ChatGPT or Gemini or whichever large language model you're using. But I put all of my prompts that I've taken time to write in like a prompt library. So I have them all ready to go. So I can just copy paste, make a few tweaks, and then that way I can ask it what I want it to do with the information already there.
That's a
I
great
love
idea.
that. And I also love, I know I've read your guide, your workbook that you have about using AI for language learning. I love
Thanks.
how you lay out also that like these are the steps to writing a prompt.
Right,
And these are the security considerations and the policy considerations.
right.
So I think with all these tools and all of this potential, and I also love that you're involving students in starting to learn these tools, because I think that's going to also be a big part of literacy and communication as we move forward for people to be able to use it. What are some of those complications or guardrails you really need in place to consider? Because I hear that you're doing it so well as a district, really empowering your students to do that. That's scary when you're thinking about what you're putting in the hands of these people that might not know everything
Well,
yet.
and what
Yeah.
you're putting in the hands of the algorithm, because if it's
Mhm.
that's I mean, you're probably going to speak to this, but I mean, that's what the difference between a paid product and an unpaid product sometimes is who's getting access to all the
Mm,
information we're uploading
exactly.
into
Yeah.
it. So, I don't know, sorry to interrupt, but that's
Yeah, that was good. No, so like what are some of those, like you're saying, how do we make this leap with students and do it safely and intentionally and make it less scary for
Right.
all the
Well,
potential
I
for a
think
leap?
depending on the student's age, that's number one. So I happen to work in a regional high school district where the students are at least 14 years or older, which is nice because there's different policies for students under the age of 13. But I have worked with districts who are using these tools with their middle school students as well, and really understanding, number one, what it does and how it works, like the behind the scenes is super important. In New Jersey, we have a requirement to graduate from high school called financial literacy. I'm not sure if all states have this, but we have that here in New Jersey.
Not even
So
they don't all have it.
so we have it's mandatory in order to graduate from our public school system, they have to take this 2.5 financial literacy class. I believe that in the future, and I don't think it's going to be the too distant future, that we're going to have an AI literacy requirement as well. So I can see our Department of Education saying this is just as important in order to be right a productive member of society, to go out there when you graduate from our schools, that you have a basic understanding of how generative AI works and what it can do. So with our students, I know that they've formed committees. We've had meetings with the administration team. We now have classes that are geared towards understanding what AI is and really building what we're calling AI fluency and using these tools with an understanding of how they work, but then also keeping in mind the ethical side of everything and the security side of it. So we're lucky that we can have these conversations with our students because they're at that age where they do have that independence. And we do want to foster that independence too. So setting up classroom policies. So at the start of the year, everyone for me signed a classroom contract that I co-developed with them. And we understood that if we're going to use artificial intelligence, this is the why behind the use of it, not just to use it. And then this is how we're going to be doing it as a class community. So there is that responsibility factor in mind. We also purchased Speakology AI as a district or as a department. And this particular platform allows students to interact with AI through phone or through video. And this in the moment use of AI, some students have said to me they don't want to use it. They don't want to talk to this AI bot. And then other students have really appreciated the feedback that it gives and the in the moment conversation skills that they're getting from the conversation that we set up with the chatbots.
We spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about proficiency.
We sure do. But knowing about proficiency and actually applying it can sometimes feel like two different things.
I know. That's exactly why Avant created Avant Advance.
Advance is an on-demand course that deepens your understanding of proficiency levels while giving you practice analyzing authentic student writing samples in your selected language. It's available in 10 languages and counting.
Amazing. So you're not just learning about proficiency, you're practicing how to interpret it with confidence and given strategies to apply the learning directly to your classroom.
You can even earn up to 15 PDUs, and you'll earn a certificate upon completion of the course.
Learn more at avantassessment.com/advance.
I love that. I love that you're talking also about that you're giving choice and you're giving voice to the students to have a say in this because they're also digital natives and they have perspective on that. Often I would notice when I have student input, I would even get ideas I hadn't even thought of that are even beyond what I might have set out to do. So I love that involvement with it.
Some of the pushback I've heard from the
Yeah.
younger generation of students is the environmental concerns of the strain that AI puts on the environment. I wonder if have any of your students pushed back in that way? How do you
Absolutely.
handle that?
Absolutely. Just last week, I had a student tell me that they didn't want to use the platform that we were using because they weren't comfortable engaging with artificial intelligence because of the environmental impact. So I said, no problem. Just turn and talk and have a conversation with me then. And that's how we adjusted, given that opinion. And that's absolutely fine. There is the environmental impact. It's good for our students to understand that there is a depletion of our natural resources as a result of using these tools. So it's important for them to also, when they're prompting, when they're engaging with artificial intelligence, that they know that this back and forth going on and on and on is not a wise use of our environmental resources. I also think that our students can be challenged to think about what are some sustainable ways that we can power these data centers, or what are some ways in which we can change how it is that they're impacting our natural resources. Because I think that we have this really incredible tool, but if it's draining, right, our water, our natural fresh water, okay, so then what are other ways that we can cool down these machines that don't have such a large environmental impact? I don't think I'm going to solve that problem, but I hope that my students, right, understanding that that's a real issue and that legitimately needs to be addressed. Again, knowing that this technology is not going anywhere and people are using it, there's not a lot of oversight, which is definitely scary, but there's also a lot of money that's being thrown into this industry.
And being
Not a lot of
made
government
from it.
regulation, a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's kind of a recipe for disaster. So I'm hoping that knowing what we know so far, if we can talk about this with our students, what can they do to help potentially solve these current problems and current issues with using this technology?
I'm hearing so many important things that you're saying from the beginning till now. I'm hearing a lot about empowering students, and particularly to be responsible and to think outside the box and to be future thinking and not to just accept everything that's, handed to them, but to do that for a reason and thinking about it and making potential changes and improving. And I just here. Tell us some
Well,
more.
that's history, right?
Yeah.
And even like thinking about like cars. We all drive cars, right? We all use cars. There's some people that don't want to, and they They ride their bike everywhere or they walk, which is absolutely fine. But I think that there's concerns with the air pollution, right? That cars cause and the gas and everything that goes into the gas industry and how unsustainable that is. So, what are some current solutions or what are some things that we can do in the future? Just thinking about how our cities are set up and our structures. There's places all around the world that are cognizant of the impact that cars have on their environment, but they've made changes. I just know that change takes time and change takes money, but
And
there's things that we can
discomfort, I
absolutely
think that,
do. Yeah,
sorry to interrupt,
discomfort
but
for
I think
sure.
change causes discomfort. And we were
Absolutely.
just talking about that with a colleague recently, how sitting it with discomfort, even in how it works in education, like in learning a language, you have to sit with discomfort and your students have to sit with discomfort. And productive, we call it productive struggle, right?
Yeah.
But any kind of, like, I just love that you're saying any kind of change, whether it was the invention of the tractor or the industrial revolution, whether it was we all thought the world was going to crash when the internet came out, and Y2K, if you're old enough to remember that, as I am. But I think I just love that you pointed to history, because I think that's really important for myself, for all of us to remember. In some ways there's nothing new under the sun, and in some ways we're constantly creating new things. And so to be cognizant of all of that, I really appreciate your words of wisdom.
I love that. And I'm wondering with this, because some other concern with using AI is it inhibits our independent thinking, that future, that creative thinking. And I think that's a big criticism. I think I hear, you know, AI can feed back, almost regenerating from resources that exist, but it's not going to synthesize potential options that have not been trained on, that do not exist. So, how do we still teach students to live in that productive struggle, to think creatively and critically and expansively, while also using these tools that can help them in real ways? How do you, as an educator, an AI expert, how do you balance those two that we really need to be considering at the same time?
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point too, is that loss of critical thinking. And even as an adult too, it's changing the way that I work and the way that I operate because of this technology, knowing that it's there. So if that's my experience, absolutely my students are shifting in that direction. So I go back to what does the assessment look like and what is the learning to get there? And whether or not we shift more towards celebrating that productive struggle as we're talking about versus whatever that final output is. So I've always used portfolios, but I think even more so now it's important to have students really track their progress and see what they were doing at one point in the year versus what they're doing 6 months later, 10 months later, and really celebrating that success over time. I think that has more merit than like a project that they do for me that they can easily have ChatGPT write for them. I also like to see everything done with me in the moment. And we're still handwriting, to be honest. Like we're still doing those first versions, skipping lines, because I want to see what they can create first and foremost, and then lean into the technology or even their peers to help them edit and to help them revise and really thinking about writing as a process. Speaking, I think it's a little bit more difficult for them to use AI at this point. And noticing too that those interpersonal communication skills are so important. And that's something that I know when they start the year and when they end the year, that's one of the things that they most are aware of that they want to continue to improve on is that spontaneous speaking. And that's something that no AI tool can really, you can't replace the human experience. You can't change also to the beauty of one's culture. That's something that I always like to infuse as much as possible is, yeah, we're learning the language, but I like to lead with the culture and make that the central focus. And then the language comes with that. So what do I need to know how to say in order to talk about this aspect of the culture or understand this product perspective or practice? So that's where I think a tool like generative AI looking at it as an enhancement, not a replacement, and going back
I like how
to,
you say that.
yeah, looking at too the learning process, because those multiple choice high stakes assessments, right? They're not serving anybody. They're just giving a lot of stress. And we've known that over time that, like, is this really good for kids, or is this just something we've always done because it's the way we know how to do assessment? So that's the conversations that I've been having over the past, I think, 3 years because of generative AI have always leaned into that direction of what can we see over time versus one final product.
What is so fascinating to me is as you're talking, I'm trying really hard to listen and understand what you're telling me. And at the same time, I'm ha my brain is coming up with a million questions, and I wanna interrupt you to ask you the next question, but then I also wanna hear what you're saying, so it's like, it's so interesting how a conversation like this, while it's teaching me, it's also making me so much more curious because I'm think you talked about culture, and then I was like, "Well, what about is AI gonna have its own culture one day?" Like, what I started having all these questions while you were talking, so I just think, I don't know. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm just having a lot of questions and curiosity about this topic, from talking with someone who's using it in the world language classroom currently, because it's different. I use it, and I started using it in the ML classroom before I left the classroom, but, I'm currently not I use it now with teachers when I work with teachers, so it's very different from using it with students, but I'm hearing you say things that teachers that I recently worked with, questions that they had, and I feel like, okay, if they're not actually implementing it, it's hard to come up with those answers. And so it's kind of like what you said. If we just put our heads in the sand and pretend like it's not there, that's not helpful. But if we just move forward with zero regulation and zero knowledge and guardrails, that's bad too. So I'm wondering what's your guide? Like where have you been learning from as an educator in order to implement this in a powerful and helpful and positive, creative way?
To help answer the question that you just asked, I think that it's incredibly important to proceed optimistically cautious with a lot of these technologies and finding that balance, because sometimes it's great to use it and sometimes it's just not. So when you're identifying a tool or you're identifying really a use first and thinking, okay, how can this help my students, and then how can technology play a role? There's plenty of times where I don't want to use the computer. I don't want the computer open because it's just distracting for the students, and it's not good for this part of the lesson or whatever my learning goals are for that particular day. So I, again, like to tread lightly, so to speak, and proceed with optimism, but I have some caution there when I do it.
And when you're looking at new tools, how do you approach your discovery? Like Liza was saying, how do you know where to look? Where do you get your answers? How do you come about finding the next option or thinking about how to responsibly do it? What would be a good source of information?
I think I definitely like lean into my colleagues here and talk to them about, okay, this has worked really well, or this is something that could be an enhancement of learning for our students. Attending conferences, going to different workshops, just kind of being kind of in the know and understanding, oh, this teacher that I really admire and trust talked about this. Let me see if it could be useful in my own practice. But again, I always go back to what's the goal of my using this? I don't want to just use it to use it, because that's a time kill, so to speak. That's not good use of my minutes with them.
Yeah.
So if it has a specific purpose that's going to help with their language proficiency, then I dig a little bit deeper and I think, okay, is this okay for my kids to use in terms of it doesn't require any identifiable information? I don't have to set up an account for them. Then again, it's checking the box even more. So from that point, then I think about, okay, how do I integrate this into a lesson, or where would it fit well to use this tool for this specific reason?
I love that you're not just using as like the new shiny flashy, oh, what's the next flashy shiny thing for my kids? Because I think, well, I'll speak for myself. I won't say all of us, but I know there have been times when I thought, oh, I got to try to jump on this train or to make the use of all these fancy things. And it's the same as you said. Then you go, oh, wait, but does that really enhance my purpose? Is it going to help them become better speakers, listeners, readers, writers, citizens, or residents of this country? And so it's like, okay, what's going to actually help my students accomplish my goal? So that's a good grounding principle to keep in mind.
I like that. And I also like that I'm hearing a lot of this backward design approach with technology and with your teaching, because I think that really grounds it in thinking of that. Where am I headed and how do I get there? And I did hear you talk a little bit about how your assessments are changing. And I know you talked about portfolio, but I'm even wondering if you're looking for language development over time, how does the assessment shift when AI is integrated as an editor, as a reviser, as a partner for students when you're assessing their language abilities independently as well?
Yeah, I haven't gotten to the point where I can trust the AI grade just yet. Um, I think that it's still important for me to listen to them, for me to read their writing. It certainly has been helpful to give feedback to students and to serve in the role of this is how you can improve, or this is what I noticed. Where you have a room full of students and you can't get to everyone right away, here is this tool that can give them immediate actionable feedback in the moment, as opposed to waiting, 3-4 days for me to do it, right? As the human. So I feel like I've used it where I can with growth in mind. And then the ultimate times where I've thought it's really important for them to really understand what my insight, but then also to do that self-reflection and to do some peer editing before it gets to me too. So really thinking about the process with presentational speaking and presentational writing, giving them more ownership to understand what we're doing well and how we can improve before we get to that final product. When I was speaking before about that learning process or that time, integrating a category into my rubric that celebrates that and thinking about what they were doing during that in-class time and whether or not they were on task and whether or not they included a reflection and whether or not they were helpful in their peer editing, that's become part of my grading rubric to go along with that final, assessment or that final grade that I'm attaching to whatever product they're creating.
I love that.
Oh my, I just feel like, kind of like I said earlier, AI is amazing, but it produces so much and it creates so much. And at the same time, it's creating all these new questions, the need for new guidelines, like you said, even the need for potentially AI literacy class, which I think goes back to Marnina's question about what does literacy look like now with AI, and particularly multilingual literacy, because that's really the heart of what we want to better understand is how do multilingual students or students who are becoming multilingual, humans, any adult, any human becoming multilingual, what is literacy? How does that process happen, especially now? I mean, we have a lot of research in the field, both multilingual and a lot more monolingual, really. But I don't know. What do you conjecture? What are your thoughts? What are you seeing?
So from the students and from this, at the end of each learning unit, I've given them a survey to give me insight on what they like, what they don't like, how they feel they're learning language best. And each survey, I've given 3 so far, and I'll give my final one towards the end of the school year. Each survey reveals that they love digital media. They want to see short videos. They appreciate seeing a lens into the authentic culture. So I've tried to infuse, when I can, these like short reels or short tutorials, or right now we're talking about our daily routine. So these like get ready with me videos that are so popular.
My
So
gosh, that's a great way to, because they're probably recording those themselves too.
Next week they're going to make one
They're
for me, right?
way better at doing it than we are.
Yes, exactly. And what's funny is they used platforms like TikTok with
Well,
such
yeah.
ease. So they're like, we just throw it all into TikTok, we edit it, and then boom, we're done. I said, that's great. So that they're not using iMovie that they have access to. That's a really powerful video editing tool. They prefer to go on TikTok, edit their film, and hand that in, submit that, which is fine. Like if that's the medium that they want to use, then so be it. But from what I'm understanding, they are such visual learners. They want to see things in action. So how can I immerse them in literacy experiences with a visual component? Or how does AI create potentially that, bring that, text to life when it wasn't there before? I was blogging recently about my use of the storybook gem on Gemini, and how that becomes, it's not necessarily a video, but having it so there are these images that match exactly what it is that's in the text or in the book. So with the students, I'm able to design a story that's totally, I mean, it could be about anything, right? And you could have them also write the story with you or for you, and then putting it into that storybook gem. And within, I think, maybe a minute or two, having it design a book with images that match the storyline. How powerful is that, right? That we can have something so quickly come to life for our students and give that visual component that didn't exist before.
And what I love is that when you talked about that in the blog, you talk about the before, during, after, the process of multiple components, multiple points of access for that text, so that you're really reaching all students, all levels, and thinking about engaging every aspect of what they need to
When I was
really
yeah,
access it.
when I was
Mhm.
recently in the ML classroom at the middle school level, which is my last teaching job, they were just starting to use AI, and they were doing something similar to what you said. And it was so powerful to reach the multilingual students, our ESOL students or MLs, whatever you want to say, any student who's here from another country or culture, or from our own country, who speaks another language besides English and is learning English, right? And so it was so cool because connecting to those students, that was what I did, obviously, but it helped the classroom teachers do that. So it wasn't just me. I'm not the only one in the whole school building who's trying to connect with my students from other cultures who already have another language and are trying to add English to their repertoire. And so it's a really good tool for, I just think, for multilingualism and multiliteracy in general. I think the possibilities, because so many people, especially in the US, haven't had the opportunity to fully learn another language, because it's such a big country and everybody speaks English, so there's not as much of a need to. And so I think it's a really powerful tool.
Love that. And I do think, though, it brings to question, because you talked about how they love that visual and that digital media access, and they also you love immersing in culture. And you said early on that that is a weak point of AI, is that ability to integrate that cultural literacy, that cultural education, and that really human connection. So how do you ensure that, if you're doing stories, if you're doing videos with AI, how do you infuse that culture and ensure that it's being represented authentically?
Right, making sure that it's an
Yeah,
accurate representation.
there we
Yes.
go. Accurate.
Right, because
Yes.
AI is gonna make mistakes, and it's
Yes,
gonna,
big
all of a
time.
sudden, the person in the video has 7 fingers on one
Yes.
hand, and it just doesn't look real. There's a few video creation tools that are out there. I've been playing around with one called Dance. The idea would be to create short videos that are connected to the target culture in such a way that it does highlight and spotlight beautiful aspects of whatever the culture is. I've seen a lot on Instagram with history, and there are these, again, just video creators that are using generative AI tools to go back in history and bring history to life. Yeah, so but people are questioning the authenticity of the
Of course, of
historical, right? Because
course.
Mhm.
you
Yeah, in
see
this day
things
and
that you're
age,
like,
my
"Was
goodness.
this really happening, right, in BC? Or was this really the truth of what you would see in a street of London at this time. But there's certain Instagram that I happen to see, and it's very engaging because the videos that they're creating are completely AI generated. The person is not real. The dialogue is written by AI. The imagery that you see is all AI produced. And what they originally had started to play around with 3 years ago has come such a far, so far. And that's also where our students, though, I'll see things come up and I'm like, that could be AI, or is that not AI? So that's where you have to fact check. And if it's something related to the news or something that you're like, did that happen? Like, is that actually happening? That's where you need multiple news sources that are credible to really believe what you're seeing, because it's very easy to watch a video and believe that it's real when it's just AI generated. So we have to caution our students too, to not just trust everything that they see as being authentic and legitimate, that there may be someone behind the scenes prompting and writing this to come to life, and it's not real.
I like that
Giving
you're
me a
teaching
million
that
more
fact
questions.
checking. That's so important because, like, how do we know that we're consuming reliable sources at this point?
Well, some of the kids too will say to me like, oh, you used AI to create that. Like I had some images at the beginning of the year. I had images and like very short, easy descriptions, lots of cognates to really empower our students in level 1 to celebrate what they already know in English as they were learning Spanish or as we're learning. And right away they looked at me and they said, you had AI create these images, didn't you? And I said, I did. I'm glad you noticed that. I used Gemini or I used ChatGPT to help create these images. Thank you for noticing. And I'll credit it. Why not? So they can know, like, I am using artificial intelligence. You should. Thank you for noticing it.
So much of what you've said has, again, created a bazillion more questions in my mind, but I'm also hearing you continue to empower your students to think critically and not to just accept everything at face value. And alarm bells go off on one side of my brain when you're talking, because I'm like, oh my gosh. But on the other side of my brain, I'm going, but yeah, like we've got to understanding the difference between artificial intelligence and human intelligence. Maybe that's what we're going to be teaching for a good while, and learning ourselves. I'm impressed. I've learned a lot from you. Thank you.
So thank you. As we work towards wrapping up, and as I know you're really on the ground seeing how literacy continues to evolve in this AI-infused multilingual world, I'm wondering for our audience, what gives you hope, or what's one shift in how we think about this that you feel is really urgent as we look to the future? Either or, whichever you're more excited to talk about.
I just think the more that we involve the students and we include them in whatever we're discussing or whatever we're testing out is the most powerful aspect, because we need their insight and we need to check in with them as often as possible to then help guide what we do. I think if we negate that, then it's going to be really hard to engage them in what we're teaching and what they're learning. But the more opportunities you can find to put the students at the center of what you're doing, I think it just makes everything better when you include them.
Love that. Thank you so much. That was so powerful, and I agree wholeheartedly. So for any of our audience who was listening or watching, if you have any questions, just reach out to any of us. All of our emails are in the show notes, and feel free to leave comments. We want everyone to be a part of this. I hope if you were listening that you realize you need to be a part of this conversation. We all need to be. If our voices aren't involved, someone else is just going to decide, and you don't know who it is. So please join this conversation with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much.
All opinions expressed in this podcast and the comments are solely those of the individual and not necessarily those of Avant.